Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Mark Martin. Today, finally a deal on President Biden's massive social spending bill. After months of bitter arguments, the Democrats have finally closed rank on a framework for the tax and spending plan. Republicans blasting Attorney General Merrick Garland over his handling of protests at school board meetings. Critics saying the Justice Department is intimidating parents who have protested school board policies. Plus, pro-lifers taking a stand across America, from political to cultural to grassroots efforts.
We are fighting to overturn Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolt, and we are fighting to open up people's eyes to the violence of abortion.
And Christian artist Lauren Daigle talks about the power of Christian music in our world.
For every single person, we have an answer for hopeless times. We have the hope of the world.
Those stories and more today on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
We begin with reports today that a framework for a deal may have finally been reached on President Biden's massive social spending bill at a cost of $1.75 to $1.9 trillion. The president is set to announce the framework of the deal this afternoon. Paid family leave appears to be out. Progressives are unhappy with that move, but West Virginia moderate Senator Joe Manchin says the country can't afford it with other government programs running out of money.
To expand social programs when you have trust funds that aren't solvent, they're going insolvent, I can't explain that. It doesn't make sense to me.
If we go down to zero paid family leave, that's not okay. That's unjust to the people.
Meanwhile, the Biden administration is still pushing to keep a measure in the bill that would allow the IRS to monitor bank accounts. The Hill reports the plan would be changed so that it focuses on taxpayers making more than $400,000 a year. Republicans and bankers have criticized the idea, calling it an invasion of privacy. Some Democrats have questioned it as well. Attorney General Merrick Garland was back in the hot seat on Capitol Hill Wednesday as he faces criticism over the Justice Department's handling of disagreements between school boards and parents, including allegations that he's using the department to intimidate parents who are strongly protesting some school board policies. Tara Mergener has the story.
GOP lawmakers are among those accusing Garland of calling parents domestic terrorists. Garland says he never used those words when asking the Justice Department to look into threats of violence.
Did you consider the chilling effect that this sort of threat of federal prosecution would have on parents' exercise of their constitutional rights to be involved in their children's education?
Pushing back at pointed criticism from Republicans, Attorney General Merrick Garland defending his memo asking the Justice Department to respond to threats aimed at school officials.
Don't believe it's reasonable to read this memorandum as chilling anyone's rights. It's about threats of violence, and it expressly recognizes the constitutional right to make arguments about your children's education.
Garland's memo followed one by the National School Board Association asking the feds to step in and included a reference to domestic terrorism. While the group has apologized, Garland has not. As this drama plays out, a protest not far from the Capitol. Moms for America and other organizations representing mothers from across the U.S.
And I take full offense to the NSBA and the DOJ referring to concerned parents like myself as domestic terrorists.
Demanding parents be included in curriculum and policy decisions like critical race theory.
CRT is also Marxist ideology. It is used to divide America and silence the oppression.
Meantime, tensions ran high at the Loudoun County School Board meeting Tuesday.
You have failed our students.
2 young ladies were scarred forever.
You were clearly aware of the sexual assault at Stonebridge.
Her life has forever been affected. I have lost almost all confidence I've had in this system that I have championed for so long.
Parents accusing Superintendent Scott Ziegler of covering up 2 sexual assaults by a 14-year-old student on school grounds and calling for Ziegler's and the board's resignation. The boy found guilty this week in the first case to be heard by a judge. Earlier this week, students staged a walkout.
Resign or be removed. Shame on you.
Garland was confronted on this issue too. The victim's father arrested at a June school board meeting while trying to tell the school board what happened.
That refers to Scott Smith, whose 15-year-old daughter was raped. She was raped in a bathroom by a boy wearing girls' clothes, and the Loudoun County School Board covered it up because it would have interfered with their transgendered policy during Pride Month.
In another development in Loudoun County, parents have been asked to sign a non-disclosure to see a new curriculum reportedly inspired by critical race theory. In Washington, I'm Tara Mergener, CBN News.
Political observers from every side will be focused on the races in Virginia and New Jersey next week when voters elect their new governors. The results of the races are expected to give some hints about next year's midterm congressional elections. After the 2020 presidential election, both parties called for major voting reform legislation. So what would that look like? Democrats and Republicans have drastically different ideas. Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson, explains.
While both Republicans and Democrats have made election integrity a major part of their platform in state and federal races, the parties are taking very different approaches toward reform.
It's ludicrous for any Republican to assert that the federal government has no role to play in safeguarding elections.
Democrats recently failed to advance the Freedom to Vote Act in the Senate. The measure would expand early and mail-in voting, allow for automatic and same-day voter registration, ease ID requirements, and prevent what they call voter suppression.
It would put in all kinds of very bad provisions that would make elections more insecure and really cause problems in future elections.
Hans von Spakovsky of the Heritage Foundation argues that voter suppression isn't a problem.
That is evidenced by the fact that, for example, in the last election last year, we had the highest turnout in an election since 1992, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. So the idea that there's voter suppression going on is just belied by the evidence.
States under GOP control, like Texas and Georgia, are passing bills that include ID requirements for absentee ballots, revised times for early voting, and bans unsolicited requests for mail-in ballots.
The best way to inspire confidence is to fix the vulnerabilities that currently exist, and that's what a number of states like Georgia, Texas, Florida, and others, they've passed election reform bills to actually try to fix some of those problems.
Spakovsky tells CBN News states should also conduct audits after elections.
The whole point of an audit is not to overturn a prior election, but to make sure that all the laws and regulations were followed, that everyone was able to vote who was eligible to vote, that the equipment all worked the way it should.
With former President Trump doubling down on claims of widespread voter fraud in 2020, the question remains how that might affect turnout in close statewide governor races like New Jersey and Virginia.
If voters believe that the system is rigged and their vote isn't going to count, then that's certainly a disincentive to vote.
Inside Elections' Nathan Gonzalez told CBN News despite those claims, he believes voters from both parties will show up at the polls.
I think in the case of Virginia, Republicans are anxious to send a message to President Joe Biden and the Democrats, and I think that any concerns about the system will be overcome with enthusiasm to send a message.
Gonzalez believes no matter who wins these upcoming races, claims of fraud or vote rigging by the party that loses are likely to follow. Reporting from Virginia, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Switching gears, good news for Bible teacher and author Max Lucado. Over the summer, Lucado told the world he was suffering from a large bulge in a major blood vessel close to his heart, which might have required surgery. This week, Lucado announced new tests show the aneurysm has actually shrunk in size, so much so that he won't need a medical follow-up for another year. While doctors cite a more precise test for the good news, Lucado is giving credit to God and people's prayers. Coming up, the pro-life battle on different fronts, from political to cultural to grassroots efforts across America. We'll hear about that when we come back. The fight for life will soon make its way to the Supreme Court again with a case that could challenge Roe v. Wade. Here to talk about a new pro-life campaign leading into it is Christina Bennett with Live Action. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. First of all, tell us what's ahead at the Supreme Court.
Well, on November 1st, the Supreme Court announced that they will listen to arguments. The Department of Justice, unfortunately, is trying to sue the state of Texas because of their heartbeat bill, along with abortion providers such as Whole Women's Health, who are also trying to sue the state of Texas. And so on November 1st, the Supreme Court is willing to listen to their arguments. And then on December 1st, the Supreme Court is going to start hearing arguments regarding Mississippi's abortion ban at 15 weeks.
Tell us about the hashtag 2363 campaign.
2363 is a number that represents the amount of abortions that happen every day in America. It is an absolute tragedy that 2363 represents so many lives that are lost every day to the violence of abortion. And at Live Action, we are trying to take that number 2363 to zero. We want to eliminate all abortions by providing help and resources and aid for women and families. We want 2363 to go to zero. And we are releasing information through events, through vigils, through rallies, through different campaigns. We just had an amazing event in Santa Monica called Unite for Life. And we are just trying to let people know what's happening with abortion so that they will stand up against it.
What is the mission specifically over the coming weeks leading into the Texas case and then into the Mississippi case?
The mission is just to get everyone on board, for them to understand what's at stake here, that we are fighting to overturn Roe versus Wade and Doe versus Bolton. We are fighting to open up people's eyes to the violence of abortion. We are fighting for the dignity and the protection of unborn children. And we are wanting everyone to get on board. We are talking to people on the street. We are talking to people through social media. We want them to pray. We want them to connect with their legislators. We want them to talk to their family members, friends, churches, organizations. We want them to take a stand for life, because this is an important moment and we must stand up.
Give us a summary, Christina, of your personal story regarding abortion.
I was scheduled to be aborted at Mount Sinai Hospital in Hartford, Connecticut in 1981. My mom paid for an abortion, but she ended up walking out of the abortion appointment because a janitor talked to her and told her that God would give her the strength to keep me. And even though the abortion doctor fought with her and told her that she'd already paid for it, she ended up leaving and she saved my life. She never told me, but in my 20s, I found out and I decided I was going to stand up against abortion. And I've been doing that ever since.
Wow, you have quite the testimony. That's awesome. I'll tell you what, talk about a divine appointment for your mom to meet that janitor at just the right time to hear about the message of life. Talk about the grassroots efforts in the fight for the unborn, Christina. Is that where hearts can really be changed?
Absolutely. Hearts are changed every day when we're engaging with people through Live Action. We do Man on the Street videos where we'll go on the street and we'll show people videos of what it looks like when an abortion happens. And unfortunately, so many people are ignorant. They really do not know what an abortion looks like or what takes place in an abortion. And so when we do these Man on the Street videos and we show people, we have a former abortion doctor, Dr. Levitano, who goes through the procedure. And when people see it, their hearts change. They say, wow, I didn't know that this is what an abortion looked like. This is gruesome. This is barbaric. This is violent. I changed my mind. People's hearts and minds are also being changed in pregnancy resource centers all across the country, thousands of them. When women go in for free ultrasounds or free pregnancy tests and they're listening to client advocates, their hearts are being changed. And so in various ways, the March for Life that's coming up in January, in various ways, the pro-life movement every day is changing hearts and minds.
How would you encourage pro-life Americans to stand for life for the unborn and after? Many pro-choice people say it's just not enough to speak for the unborn, but for life at every stage. What's your response to that?
I think that the fight for life begins in the womb, and it is important, of course, to fight for life in various different ways, but none of that can happen unless the child is first born. So I had to be born first before I could have an education, before I could marry, before I could have justice in various ways in society. I had to be born first, and that is why the right to life is foundational. We have to first fight for the right to children to be born, and we can do it in a number of different ways. I would say first start with looking at your own life. What skill sets do you have? What gifts do you have? What talents do you have? What resources? Who are you connected to? How can you use your money, your time, your gifts, your talents, your skills to end abortion and to save lives in your community?
All right, Christina Bennett with Live Action. Thanks for your time, Christina. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
An important message there. Well, still ahead, what's really behind a military coup in Sudan and a look at the international implications. We're going to have that right after this. Welcome back to Newswatch. What's the real reason behind the military coup in Sudan, and how should the United States respond? On tonight's edition of the Global Lane, Near East Center for Strategic Engagement CEO Sargi Sangari says the Sudan military took action to possibly prevent Islamic terrorists from gaining a foothold in the Horn of Africa.
It's very much possible that the military made the move to ensure that Muslim Brotherhood will not be able to have another opportunity to come back into the region. Because if it did that, then it would destabilize that entire area from Egypt all the way down to Kenya, to Uganda, and Tanzania, and so on. So.
Well, I understand that the military there in Sudan is very close to the Egyptian military, and they both oppose this GERD, the big dam that Ethiopia is planning.
Well, they do, but I think that's more of a political piece. When you look at the technical aspect of it, it's not that much of an issue. But, of course, the countries will use the dam as a piece. Now, the current military in Sudan has still stated that they're still committed to elections in 2023, which would now put the Sudan elections on the same timeline technically with the South Sudanese elections. And if you listen to what is coming out from the major military powers, are very tied to each other. In this case, Sudan, Egypt, Kenya, Uganda, and all the other powers within the region. You're not seeing too much of a pushback as far as the coup is concerned. I think the worry that the Sudanese military, was that it was be possible that what Egypt went through under Obama administration, where the Muslim Brotherhoods came to power, that they were starting to feel that they were being squeezed to the same level under the current Biden administration, who has some of the same old advisors that were under Obama. And Jeff Feltman, who was a special envoy for the U.S., was there the day before the coup took place. So you can kind of look at what the possibility of how badly U.S. foreign policy is somewhat feckless in the region.
Do you think our officials even knew that the Muslim Brotherhood was active there?
I don't think they knew, to be honest, and I think they were caught off guard. I mean, you heard the reporters themselves said it was a surprise for him as to what happened within the region. Some advisor had told them that. The fact that it was the Sudanese military that actually conducted a raid while I was there on the ground in Kenya against an ISIS cell, and they lost 10 of their officers, showed that ISIS and the Muslim Brotherhood was very active within the borders of Sudan. The worry is that this would have had also destabilizing effects on South Sudan. Even the South Sudanese military recently has pushed back on Kiir's ability to possibly control them by saying that we're not going to accept payments anymore because we want to see a change in the military of South Sudan, or I should say in the future of South Sudan. So the militaries in the region from Egypt to Sudan and South Sudan somewhat are linked together on the same pathway of wanting to make sure that you get rid of the Muslim Brotherhood within the region.
Well, Egypt knows that very well, and we've seen the effect of that when the Brotherhood came into power there in Egypt and really persecuted the Christians there. So why should our viewers, people here in the USA and around the world, be concerned about this?
Concerned about it because, like I said, it's a feckless ability of the U.S. to be able to affect foreign policy when you have your special envoy the day after he leaves for a coup to take place, and you have the POTUS in the U.S. not knowing what's happening. It's as equivalent as when we had our CIA chief meet with the Taliban, and within 72 hours, an attack had taken place against U.S. forces, which was the last final suicide attack against our forces before we left Afghanistan. I think we were losing our footprint within the region. I think if anybody really had a very good understanding of the region is the Israelis, because at the same time, the transitional government was looking forward to being part of the Abraham Accord. And I think when you hear nothing really seriously coming out against this particular coup from the Israelis, it means that they probably understood what was happening on the ground, and U.S. had no clue.
And quickly, how should we respond then, the United States at this point?
Well, the issue is you cannot support a coup, but at the same time, you have to understand why the coup took place. All we could do is ensure that we hold the current military powers in Sudan to their word that there will be elections in 2023 and help them and help the regional powers to finally get rid of the Muslim Brotherhood and ISIS that is operating out of Horn of Africa. Because if they're operational, then as it was before the 2019 coup, where you saw Bashir out, Iran even was able to use Bashir to move what it wanted within the region. We need to get rid of the ability for these terror operating networks and state to be functioning and have a foothold and roots in Horn of Africa.
Okay, Sargis Ngare, CEO of the Near East Center for Strategic Engagement. Thank you, Sargis, for sharing your time and insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. God bless.
For a look at more important trends and stories in the news, watch The Global Lane. It's tonight at 8:30 Eastern on the CBN News Channel, or you can watch it on the CBN News app. Coming up, award-winning Christian artist Lauren Daigle talks about the powerful influence she hopes Christian music has in this generation and in the future. We're going to hear from her when we come back. Stay with us. Award-winning Christian artist Lauren Daigle believes that Christian music can really make a difference in the world today, just as it has for generations. Speaking recently at a music awards event, she told a reporter that Christian musicians should focus on songs that point to Christ and bring people together.
If the Christian music industry taps into that and understands, like, we have the thing that will reign true for all hearts of men, for every single person. We have an answer for hopeless times. We have the hope of the world. So if we can tap into that in our writing, in our lyricism, and in our melodies, then we'll have a song that the world can cling to.
Daigle is one of the contemporary Christian music industry's most award-winning artists. At just 30 years old, her soulful music and voice have brought chart-topping hits like You Say from her Look Up Child album, both of which were winners at the 2019 Grammys. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. Also, tell us what you think about the stories you've seen by emailing newswatch@cbn.com or talk to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day.